from. I didn't notice anything wrong with the dog's paws, but, it was also, it's a dark corner, so I wasn't completely sure, whether there might be a piece of glass wedged into one of the paws or something, but I didn't see anything like that at that time.
Okay, so was it dark? It was dark in that area, sir?
That's a very dark corner. It's a dark area. That side of the street is dark.
That side of the street, meaning the west side of Bundy?
Yes, the west side of Bundy is darker than the east side of Bundy, just because of the nature of the street lights that are there.
Okay. So what happened after you looked at the dog? You noticed its paws and its legs and its collar.
Yeah.
What happened next?
Well, I was confused. I didn't know exactly what to make of the situation, and I didn't know what the dog would do. At that point, I crossed the street. I crossed from the east side of Bundy, from the west side of Bundy to the east side of Bundy to see basically what the dog would do.
All right, you said you went from the west side to the east side of Bundy?
Yes, that's another part of my route. That's what I do. I cross the street at that point. That's what I do. It's a little lighter on that side of the street.
So you like it better because it's lighter on the east side of the street?
Yes.
Now, I'm pointing to you this red house and the blue house.
Yes.
On the west side of Bundy.
Yes.
Okay. And you saw the dog on the corner of Dorothy and Bundy. Was it
Yes.
on the west side?
That was on the west side. Yes.
And after you looked at the dog, you crossed over to the east side.
Yes.
And what did you do then?
Well, I basically wanted to see what the dog would do. If the dog would go in a particular direction, then maybe I could follow it and find out where it came from. But the dog stayed with myself and my dog. It crossed the street with us. It stayed with us.
And did it follow you?
Yeah, at that point, I turned left to head back. At that point, I continued. I turned left to go down back towards Montana, and the dog stayed with us as we walked, but it continued its routine of, as we passed a house, it would look down the path and bark and howl at the houses that we passed.
Did it do that at every house that you passed?
It did that at every house along here on this side of Bundy. It did this at several houses along here. Pretty consistently, when there was a path that led up the street. Sometimes there were steps and things like that, and there's even a wall. But when there was a situation with a path leading to a door, it would bark down the path.
For the record, when the witness said along here, he was pointing to the east side of Bundy in the area of the two icons that are depicted on that side of the street.
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. So every time it would pass a house on the east side of Bundy where you were all walking that had a path leading up to it, it would stop and bark?
It would stop and bark. It barked down the path.
And how many times did it do that?
I would say approximately 3 times. It was several. It was more than one. But it wasn't like 10 or 12. It was approximately 3 times it did that.
Did that seem unusual to you?
That seemed very unusual to me. I had not seen a dog behave in this manner ever, and I didn't know whether it was because it was lost or because it had come from one of these houses. But that didn't appear to be the case either, because it didn't turn down the path to any of these houses. It would just bark at them.
Now, what was the traffic in that area at that time? Was it very heavy? Was it very light?
Bundy is very quiet that time of night, especially a Sunday night. There's not a lot of traffic on the street. I don't recall seeing a particular number of cars. I wouldn't necessarily say there were no cars, but there was not very much traffic at all. There generally isn't when I walk that time of night.
And did you continue to walk and the dog continued to follow you?
Yes, I continued down I continued down Bundy towards Gorham.
How did the dog stay close to you?
Yes, the dog stayed very close to me. Would do this thing of barking at the houses, and the first couple of times I kind of watched just to see what was going on, but then later I continued walking, and the dog would catch up to us in order to stay with us. It would bark, but it very clearly wanted to stay with myself and my dog.
Now, did you just say that you turned onto Gorham, or you just crossed Gorham?
No, I was walking towards Gorham at that point. I had turned left at Bundy and Dorothy and was walking along the east side of the street towards Bundy and Gorham.
Okay. What happened next?
Well, at that point, I saw a police officer drive by, and the unusual nature of all this, I flagged down the police officer to tell him that I had found this lost dog, and that it was unusual to see a loose dog in Brentwood at this time of night. It's unusual to see a loose dog in Brentwood at any time. This was the only time I've seen it.
All right, were you concerned with what to do with the dog?
I was concerned about the dog. Being a pet owner myself, I'm very sensitive to a dog being separated from its owner. So what I had done in the past when my wife or myself had found a lost dog was to bring the dog home and try to find the owner by putting up posters, and you see them all the time on the street, lost dog, maybe take a picture of the dog and put that with it. Because I had no idea how long this dog had been lost for. The dirtiness of it led me to believe that it might have been some time.
Did you encounter any police on your walk?
Yes, as I was walking between Dorothy and Gorham on Bundy, I saw a police officer drive by and I flagged him down.
Did you have some conversation with him?
Yes, at that point I told him that I had found this lost dog and indicated the corner at which I had found the dog, and told him that I didn't know exactly what to do in the situation. That I wanted to alert him, and maybe someone had reported a lost dog in the neighborhood, or maybe he could call someone who would know if there was a lost dog reported in the neighborhood.
And did you ask him for some help?
Yeah, I told him, and I didn't have an extra leash or anything on me, so I didn't, know what the dog was going to do. So I told him about the situation, that the dog was loose in the neighborhood, and he told me not to worry about it, he would take care of it, and that I should continue home. And I said, okay.
What happened then?
Well, I continued walking towards my house, or walking then down towards Gorham, but the dog stayed with me still. The dog continued to stay right next to myself and my dog.
So he wouldn't stay with the police officer?
He didn't stay with the police officer. The dog was still intent on sticking with myself and my dog.
Did the dog continue to bark as you went home?
Yes, the dog barked considerably at the corner of Gorham and Bundy. This was like the loudest barking really that it did in the course of the time that I was with it, and it went on for a longer period of time than it had barking at the individual houses. It really, barked and howled quite a bit. I can show you here. Right about here. Again, this is my habit. I cross the street here. I have to cross Gorham, and I end up crossing from the east side and ending up back on the west side of Bundy. And so I crossed the street here, and the dog stood at this point here and barked considerably as my dog and I continued to walk down Bundy towards Montana.
Can you look at your monitor, sir? You see where that pink arrow is? Can we use a different
That's
color?
basically correct, except it's the other side of the street.
That yellow arrow?
Yeah, it was on again, at this point it was the west side of Bundy.
On the west side of Bundy.
Yes.
Can you move it a little bit to the left, John? Thank you. A little bit more?
No, it's
How's that?
That's pretty close. I don't know if you can get the arrow to point in the other direction from the other side, but that would be more accurate. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Pointing that way.
Back it up a little bit more west,
More
little
west?
left, little to the left, further to the left. Yeah, like at that point there, the dog barked considerably as my dog and I headed on Bundy, now back on the west side of Bundy, back towards Montana.
Okay. And then did you continue home?
I continued home, and at that point I wasn't certain whether the dog would continue to follow us because it was barking and the police officer was there. But it did. It stopped barking after a minute or so and caught up to myself and my dog and continued with us.
And when you walked into your apartment building, was it still following you?
Yes. Yes.
Now, at your building, is there a courtyard that you walk into from the street?
Yes, our building has a courtyard with a pool.
And did the dog follow you into that courtyard?
Yes.
Is your apartment, was it upstairs or was it downstairs?
So I live on the second floor of my apartment complex.
Did you walk up to your apartment on the
Yes.
second floor?
Yes, I walked up the stairs to my apartment.
And did the dog follow you up to your apartment on the second floor?
Yes, it did. It followed me all the way up to the landing outside of my apartment.
Do you recall what time you got home?
Well, it was approximately 5 minutes after 11 o'clock. I came in the door, and I opened the door. My wife was sitting at the computer, and behind her I saw the TV set, and the Mary Tyler Moore Show was on, and it was the beginning of that episode, and I was relieved that it hadn't taken me much longer to get home than usual, because my wife sometimes worries about me if I'm out more than a half hour. She knows I have this routine, so if I had been out considerably longer, she might have been worried, but she wasn't.
Okay. So the Mary Tyler Moore Show had just started,
Yeah, it was the beginning of the episode.
and do you know what time it began? That show began on Sunday night on June the 12th?
Yes, that show begins at 11 o'clock.
Do you remember the episode that was on?
Yes, I remember. It was an episode that I had seen previously involving Mary dating someone from a rival station.
Okay. And that had just begun?
Yeah, it was the beginning of that particular episode.
So it was approximately, you said 11:05?
Yeah, approximately that's what time it was.
Now, did you let the dog into your apartment?
No, I didn't. As I said previously, I have a cat, and I didn't want to upset the cat by bringing the large dog in right at that point. So I closed the door behind me. The dog was on the landing outside, and I hadn't told my wife yet, so I told my wife, Linda, that this big Akita had followed me home.
And what did you do with the dog?
Dog was on the landing outside my apartment, and I told Linda that the dog had followed me home, and she said something like "You're kidding," and I said no, and I opened the door and showed her that the dog was standing there at the landing to our apartment.
It just stayed there?
It just stayed there.
Okay.
And she went out to see that, in fact, it was real. It was just this big Akita standing at the landing to our apartment.
Why was that so strange that this dog would stay there on the landing? Because of the... I'm sorry?
You handling this witness, Mr. Douglas? All right.
Why did you think that was strange?
Well, it was unusual.
Well, roll the objection. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Let me think about it every now and again. All right.
I thought of a better question. Why did you think that was strange?
I thought it was unusual for a dog to, attach itself quickly to a person that it didn't know. I'd never seen the dog before, so it was strange that the dog would stay with us.
Are you familiar with how much an Akita costs?
I know that they're expensive dogs.
Did it seem unusual that an expensive dog like that would be out running around alone?
Yeah, absolutely. The dog seemed well bred and well cared for, and again that the collar was very expensive. So I knew that this was not some stray street dog, but that this was an expensive dog.
Okay. So what did you do with the dog?
Well, I had spoken to the police officer as we were coming home as I was walking home on Bundy as I was walking on Montana between Bundy and my house, the police officer had stopped again, seeing that the dog was not staying in the area but was following me, and I spoke to him, and he said, "It's obvious the dog wants to follow you. Why don't you continue home?" And he said he would call animal control, and they would come by to take care of the dog. And I said that was fine. I gave him my name, address, and phone number, and went home. And so, after showing my wife that I had the dog, we got a spare leash and went out to sit on the steps leading to my apartment complex on Montana and wait for the people from animal control to show up.
Did they show up?
No, they did not show up.
So what did you do?
So now that we had the spare leash on the dog, we decided to walk the dog back towards where I found it. Maybe the people had noticed that it was missing, had come out by that time. So our intention was to take the dog back to the corner of Bundy and Dorothy.
And what happened?
Well, as I walked the dog towards Bundy, along Montana, the dog pulled back. The dog shied away from going towards Bundy. It kept pulling back towards my apartment complex.
It was pulling back?
It was pulling back. It was not allowing me to walk it towards Bundy. It was pulling away.
Can you describe what the weather was like that night?
It was a relatively cool night. It had been hot during the day, but in our neighborhood, so close to the ocean, it gets much cooler at night, and this was no exception. It cooled down considerably from the day.
How was the dog behaving?
Well, at this point, with the dog pulling away, again, this was also unusual. I noticed at that point that the dog was dehydrated, that it was panting, that its tongue was dry, and it seemed to need water because it was continual. At this point, it wasn't barking any longer. It was continually panting.
So it seemed dehydrated?
Yes, it did.
Like it needed water?
Yes.
So what did you do?
So we walked the dog back to the courtyard of my building, and I went upstairs to get some water for the dog.
Did your dog drink?
Yeah, I went upstairs. I took my dog's dish, filled it with water, and as I was going back, I noticed that my light on my answering machine was blinking, but I didn't check the message or anything. I went downstairs, gave the dog the bowl of water, and it drank considerably. It drank quite a lot.
Now, when you were down in the courtyard, was there more light?
Yes, the courtyard of my building is fairly well lit. There's lights all around, and there's lights coming up from the pool, so it's fairly well lit.
As opposed to the dark area where you found the dog on the street?
Yes, there was much more light in the courtyard area.
Okay. At that time, did you take the opportunity to look more closely at the dog?
Yes, at this point I wanted to check the paws again to see if it was cut or bleeding, if there was a piece of glass wedged in one of the paws, and that was where the blood had come from. And so I checked, and the dog was getting a little bit calmer. It was not so dehydrated. So with that opportunity, I checked the dog's paws.
Did you check all four paws?
I checked all four paws.
Did you see blood on all four paws?
Yes, there was blood on all four of the paws.
And on the legs, did you see blood?
Some of the legs had blood splattered up the legs.
And did you find any injury on the dog that could be the source of that blood?
No, there was no injury. It let me touch the paws, it let me examine them, and it didn't shy away as if it was in pain. There was no glass in any of the paws, and it wasn't limping or walking in a strange way at any point.
You indicated before that the belly and even the chest of the dog, at first when you saw it in the dark area of Bundy and Dorothy, seemed to be muddy.
Yep.
Could you tell at this point, in the better light of the courtyard, whether it was muddy and dirty or bloody on the chest and the stomach?
It was dirty, and it was dried brown stuff, and I really don't know what color blood turns after it dries, but it was this dried brown stuff that I figured was either either mud or more blood.
So as to that part of the dog, you couldn't tell?
I couldn't tell because it was brown at this point, and it was dried at this point.
Did you remember seeing any mud on the legs of the dog?
No.
No mud? Only
No.
blood?
Only the blood that I saw.
All right, at some point, did you have contact with animal control?
Well, I had seen the light blinking on my answering machine when I went to get the water. So I stayed down with the dog while it drank, and my wife went upstairs to check the message, and she came down and said it was people.
Okay, what she said, yeah, hearsay.
Right. Your wife came down and told you something,
Mm-hmm.
and based on what she told you, what did you do?
I went back upstairs and listened to the message, and it was from animal control.
Submit it.
All right. Part of the answer that the call was from animal control, that is stricken. Jury's ordered to disregard that. Ms. Clark?
You got a phone call.
Yes,
You spoke to someone.
yes.
Based on what that person told you, what did you do?
Well, based on that information, I knew that I had to either bring the dog to animal control myself by midnight or keep the dog overnight.
Did you want to take the dog to animal control?
I did not feel good at that point about taking the dog to animal control because I knew that the dog would be left there alone overnight, that there would be no one there to watch the dog. I didn't know if they would feed the dog before the person left animal control. I simply knew that the dog would be left alone overnight at animal control.
Okay. So what did you do at that point?
I went back downstairs with the dog, back downstairs to the dog, and considered various options. One would be to bring the dog inside, maybe lock my cat in another room and keep the dog inside. Another option would have been to tie the dog up in the courtyard and let it stay there overnight. That concerned me because of the barking that it had done. If it started barking or howling in the middle of the night, it might disturb some of my neighbors. The third option would be once again try to walk it back to the corner of Dorothy and Bundy. And I was considering those options. I knew at that point that I was not going to take the dog to animal control myself, that I was going to keep the dog overnight.
So where were you seated at that time?
I was standing actually in the courtyard of my building in front of the staircase that leads up to my apartment. I had placed the bowl at the foot of the stairs, and the dog at that point was lying down.
Did someone that you knew from your apartment building appear in the courtyard?
Yes, at that point, Shukru Bostepi, my downstairs neighbor, entered from the back entrance to my apartment complex.
Okay. Ma'am, I'm going to spell that for the reporter. S-U, you have it? Okay. Sukru Bostepi showed up?
Yes, that's
And you knew
correct.
him from as a neighbor of yours in that building?
Yes, Shukru is my downstairs neighbor, and we're very close. We had a garage sale earlier that day. He takes care of my pets when I'm on vacation.
Okay.
We're very close.
What time was it when you saw him arrive?
That would be approximately 11:40.
Okay. Was he alone when you saw him first?
When I first saw him, he was by himself coming from the back entrance to our apartment complex.
And he has a wife?
Yes.
And her name is?
Her name is Bettina Rasmussen.
And do you have that one, Chris? Okay. Where did she come out also?
Yes, she came out from their apartment. It says they're our downstairs neighbor. We have almost identical apartments. Ours is on the second floor, theirs is on the first floor. So at that point, I was there with my wife and the dog, virtually in front of their apartment door. So he came home and she came out, and he asked where I got the dog, where this dog had come from.
All right. And then did you tell him everything that you've told us about how you found the dog?
Yes, I explained the situation up to this point and the fact that we didn't want to take the dog to animal control.
Okay.
Ms.
And
Clark,
did
do
you?
you have much more at this point?
I do. I mean, not a lot more, but
Enough.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our recess then for the noon hour at this time. Please remember carefully my admonition to you, don't discuss the case amongst yourselves, form any opinions about the case, allow anybody to talk to you about the case, or conduct any deliberations until the matter has been submitted to you. We'll stand in recess until 1:45. Mr. Schwab, you're ordered to return here at 1:45, all right? Don't discuss your testimony with anybody except for the attorneys in the case. All right? Thank you, sir.